Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A, except it's not Friday. Welcome to another installment of Monday Q&A. I hope you're all fantastic, and I hope you've all had a great weekend making plenty of glorious guitar noises. To everybody who continues to support the channel and watch my videos, a massive thank you. A big shout out goes to all my amazing supporters over on Patreon, as well as everybody who has taken the time to check out the Ragdoll discography, whether it is digitally or whether you've actually gone and bought some physical product like the twin vinyl sitting behind me, shill. Nevertheless, thank you to everybody who submitted a question for this week. I'm going to try and answer as many as I can. And if you've got a question for next week's Q&A video, simply put it in the comment section below. Let's go. Let's pick up a thread from last week's video. I was talking about my favorite Whitesnake guitar players, and I probably gave Adrian Vandenburg slightly short shrift on there. The band Vandenburg, I think I like more than Adrian's output with Whitesnake. You can definitely hear the bluesy element in Vandenburg that contemporary Whitesnake probably had at the same time in the early 80s. What Whitesnake were doing would have aligned a lot with what Vandenburg were doing. It's got that kind of bluesy touch. You can hear some of the kind of cool ideas that Adrian was developing made it into stuff like Slip of the Tongue, even though Adrian didn't end up playing on Slip of the Tongue and Steve Vai just kind of picked up the ball and ran with it. I'm one of those people who would have loved to have heard that album with more of that kind of bluesy touch that Adrian is so well known for. And what was the other band? Moon Kings, I think a more recent thing, is worth checking out as well if you like that kind of stuff. There's Vandenburg, there's Arion. Ian Lucason's one of my favorite guitar players, songwriters, and Arion are one of my favorite bands. And the band Golden Earring. That's immediately what comes to mind when I think of Dutch rock bands. So shout out to everybody watching from the Netherlands. Let me know some other great Dutch rock bands I should check out. This next one comes from friend of the channel, patron and all-around legend, funnily enough, from the Netherlands, my buddy Rutger. My thoughts on the Bruce Dickinson solo albums, in particular Chemical Wedding. I like it. I think it's Roy Z producing and playing guitar on those albums, who also played or produced the Halford album Resurrection. I really like that Halford album Resurrection. The One You Love to Hate is awesome. And there's a song on there called Locked and Loaded, which is just one of my favorite heavy riffs and just amazing Halford vocal performances. So I think I like Bruce's solo albums more than the 90s Maiden stuff, and I definitely like the Halford solo albums more than the Judas Priest albums they did at the same time. It's kind of fresh ideas, some new blood, collaborating with different players definitely seem to work in their favor, especially for the singers. I know there's people out there who love the Blaze Bayley stuff and the Ripper Rowan stuff, but for me, Resurrection is probably my favorite album out of those, and then Chemical Wedding. There's some great songs on there and some just absolute chungus guitar playing. All right, this is the part of the video where I am sure to make some people upset with my opinion. My favorite Kiss guitar player. And we have to talk about Ace Frehley straight up. Ace Frehley, easily the most important Kiss guitar player, so influential. There are so many people who play guitar and who play music in general. I would say if you call yourself a rock musician, there's probably a 50% chance the reason you do that is because of Kiss. And for guitar players, it's probably because of Ace, because there's just that element of that band that seems to transcend the music itself. There's the show and the spectacle and the mystique. And kind of in the same way, I actually can't imagine what it would have been like to hear Van Halen or Randy Rhoads or Yngwie for the first time or Jimi Hendrix for the first time. It's impossible for me to imagine what it would have been like when Kiss came out. The look, the sound. I really like some of the early albums on there. I think they're actually quite musically underrated. Ace's playing is really good. Paul's singing is amazing. Gene has some great bass lines, and Peter Criss gets bagged a lot, kind of like Lars gets bagged a lot, but he has some really creative ideas. And again, so many people play music because of those four guys. It's impossible to stress, I think, how important they are in the grand scheme of rock and everything that came after it. But I'm going to say this, Bruce Kulick is easily my favorite Kiss guitar player, and I have to give Cam, the drummer in Ragdoll, a massive shout out to this. Cam is a huge Kiss fan and one of those people who basically plays music because he went and saw Kiss as a kid. Cam was able to show me the 80s Kiss stuff and then stuff like Revenge, which I just never considered when I was younger. I was like, why do I want to listen to Kiss without makeup? You know, what's the point? But Revenge in particular is absolutely slamming. And when I think of my favorite Kiss guitar solos, I actually think of Bruce, and Bruce is a super underrated player. Bruce was, you know, keeping up with what everybody else was doing in the crazy 80s. And, you know, to have impact in a band that had like Paul Stanley in all his pomp and everything else going on there is no mean feat. The Vinnie Vincent Kiss stuff, I don't mind. I think I like the Vinnie Vincent Invasion stuff more, and I definitely like Slaughter, which is just kind of like Vinnie Vincent Invasion without Vinnie Vincent. And then you've got Tommy Thayer, and again, Tommy does a great job. I know a lot of Kiss fans have divided opinions about Tommy because of the makeup and because of other stuff. It's like a whole political thing, isn't it? I don't think anybody would argue that when you think of Kiss, you have to think of Ace, but from a purely musical perspective, it's Bruce for me. Feel free to disagree in the comments. Let's move on from there and talk about some gear and some playing. You can see two Marshall JMP1s behind me there. How do I run them together? I basically never run them together. I've actually never tried it before. The way I used to use the JMP1 in my live rig was I would go JMP1 into a TC G major, and that would go to the effects return of a tube head and a cabinet. I actually rarely ran it in stereo. I did run it in stereo a few times, but it was always JMP1 into the G major for the stereo split and the effects in there. So I never really tried running both of them with stereo effects before it. I literally have one there because it's a backup, kind of the same reason I have 3 ADAs. This stuff is out of production, and I know at some point there's going to be some malfunctions and stuff is going to need to be serviced. So it's just kind of in my interest to have a backup, or a backup for the backup, for a lot of this old rack stuff. It kind of is an expensive hobby, given that so much of this stuff is harder to find. Used prices have gone through the roof. I am definitely to blame for a lot of that as well. So I only got myself to blame right there. But yeah, that's why I have 2 JMP1s, and they're gold and they say Marshall on them and they look cool. And I love the fact bands like Iron Maiden use them up until recently. I think Dave just switched over to an Axe-Fx, which is pretty amazing. The harmonizers in the Fractal audio devices, I think, are probably some of the best out there at the moment. I haven't spent a lot of time on my channel looking at the harmonizers. I'm going to do a block by block video at some point, and I will do a bunch of work on the pitch block and harmonies. I did a specific video on custom scales that you can go and reference, which I think you'll really, really enjoy, because you can use it, you know, for kind of custom harmonies like some of the older Boss and Roland units, but you can set it up with time delays. You can combine different custom scales in the quad shifter and do some really, really amazing stuff in there. The tracking is phenomenal on the Axe-Fx. You know, if you've ever tried the virtual capo on there, kind of blows most other stuff away. But yeah, the harmonizer, it's something that I don't use personally a lot. When I think of pitch shift effects, I always think of really funky sounding stuff. So I'll use the ring modulator for an octave down or an octave up rather than the pristine harmonies. But maybe I should do some more with it. You know, it'd be kind of cool in the Ragdoll set. I'm just thinking out loud. There's a couple of solos which do have some little overdubs on them where I could use some harmonies in there. So you may have inspired me to go and re-explore the harmonizer in there. Regarding practicing guitar, how much stuff do I do by ear and how deep do I go into music theory? Most of what I do now is by ear. You know, if I want to learn a song, I'll put it on and I'll listen to it. And I've spent so much time doing that and transcribing, and mostly through trying to teach myself how to sing and not be totally useless. I'm still totally useless when it comes to singing, but it has really helped me identify intervals and even types of chords and things like that. So developing my ears and doing ear training is an ongoing thing, and it's really, really rewarding. Much in the same way, if you're practicing guitar techniques, there's always kind of ways you can optimize your playing and new things to learn and new things to try that aren't in your wheelhouse. Your ears are the same way. And I think it's just one of those things you have to learn by doing and doing it a lot. And I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was when I was younger was I decided to try and work songs and leads out by ear. And that's just been one of the most useful musical skills that I think I've developed. Use it all the time in the studio, coming up with parts. I use it all the time live, use it when jamming. Music is something that happens at the ears and in between the ears, if you're lucky enough to have anything in between your ears. So I think cultivating that, every musician should do it. One last one for this week. Who do I think is the best guitar player on the first couple of Megadeth albums? Is it Poland, Young, Friedman, or is it secretly Dave Mustaine? I think it's secretly Dave Mustaine. Go and learn the verse part in Holy Wars and just see that it is an absolute masterpiece of rhythmic guitar composition. I've only just gone and learnt that properly, and it kind of blows my mind how many creative things are in there. The other thing that blows my mind is that Dave can play that so well, so tight, so aggressively, and sing at the same time. Rust in Peace is my favorite thrash album by quite a large margin on there. So just go and listen to the rhythm guitars on that album. As much as I adore Marty Friedman, as much as I really dig Chris Poland's kind of fusion of metal and jazz and classic rock, and as much as I think Jeff Young was the wrong choice for Megadeth, I think Dave really is the one people should talk about more. And it sounds so obvious. People always talk about Metallica and they talk about James Hetfield. Mustaine is neck and neck for me. His rhythm playing's amazing. And go and have a listen to some of his lead playing on Peace Sells as well. You always know when it's Dave playing lead, and whether he's as kind of clinical and articulate as Marty, that's not really up for debate. Marty is an absolute maestro, but Dave has this energy and aggression, and it's like just pure human will condensed into his lead playing, which I really, really admire and really enjoy. I think it's the song Devil's Island on Peace Sells, where there's just some really, really great lead playing on there. So yeah, I think people should give Dave some more love. You always know it's Dave playing lead, and Dave's rhythm playing is absolutely second to none in the thrash realm. So again, sounds kind of obvious because everyone knows Megadeth is a great band and everyone knows Dave is a great player, but I feel like it needs to be said out loud a little bit more. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for your questions. If you've got a question you would like me to answer on next week's video, put it in the comments section below. And again, if you want to support my channel, my Patreon is linked in the video description, and the Ragdoll Bandcamp page is linked in the video description. You can get our entire digital discography. You can buy physical CDs and vinyls and a bunch of other fun stuff as well. So have a great week, and I will see you all next time.